come to the beautiful Grove Library for this very special event. My name is Emily Paull and I'm an adult fiction specialist for Westbooks, a proudly WA owned and operated book supplier based in Burswood. My guest this afternoon is likely to be no stranger to the avid readers among you. Liz Byrski has been dubbed the doyenne of women's fiction by the West Australian. She's the author of 9 novels and is a writer and broadcaster with more than 40 years' experience in the British and Australian media. She lectures in professional and creative writing at Curtin University and has a PhD in writing with a focus on feminist popular fiction. Her most recent book, which we're here today to celebrate, is The Woman Next Door. Could everybody please join me in welcoming Liz?
Thanks, Emily. Thank you.
To start off with, do you think you could tell us a little bit about The Woman Next Door?
Well, then you won't read it.
Don't tell us the spoilers.
Yes, I can tell you a little bit about it. The Woman Next Door is all the female characters in the book. A group of people who've lived in the same street alongside each other for a very long time and who are now all at sort of liminal points in their lives where they're about to take decisions about their future, or somebody else may have to take those decisions for them. And basically the book is about the sort of decisions that we have to make in later life for ourselves and our friends and our families and so on, and about how relationships change during that time, and the fallout on the people around us. So that was the idea behind writing the book. As you probably know, I always write about older characters. I started out to do that because I thought older characters, particularly older women, were underrepresented in fiction. There was lots of fiction about women in their 20s, 30s and 40s, and beyond that it thinned out and you got to 60 and there was nothing. So that's why I started, but recently 2 books ago, someone said to me, why is it that your characters are getting older? I said, well, because I'm getting older. And so the books reflect what's happened to me, what I'm thinking about, what happens to friends. Not that anyone in the book is modelled on a friend or me, but it's thinking around those decisions and those times in people's lives. So, when I was in my late 60s, someone at an event like this said something remarkably insightful to me. I said that in the book that I was promoting then, that I was trying to imagine 70 and recreate 70, the age of 70 or 70s in my characters. And I said, I hope I've nailed it. And she stuck up her hand and she said, no, you haven't got it right yet. And I thought, oh, I tried so hard. And now I know she was right, because now I'm 72, and I can see what a marker the age of 70 really is in thinking about people and about women's lives. So that's the sort of thinking behind the story. Mm.
So you've got quite a wide cast of characters in this book, and you haven't really put them in conventional settings. They're all in quite unusual situations. For example, Joyce and Mac decide to spend a year living apart, but they don't necessarily want to get a divorce. What inspired these characters and their odd situations?
Well, those 2 characters were actually based on thinking about a friend of mine and her husband who were debating what they wanted to do. And they both wanted to do very different things, and they decided to give each other space to do it. And I thought that was quite remarkable and unusual, but since the book came out, so many people have written to me and said, oh, that was so interesting because we've just been going through that, or I wish my husband would talk about us doing separate things but still being together, and how do you negotiate that, and so on. So, yes, it came from observing what was happening to someone else. And my friend did say to me afterwards, your characters are much more amenable than I won't say her name or her husband's name, than us. So, yeah.
What about the other characters? Polly's getting back in the dating scene.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yes, and again that reflects experience of many of my friends who are older women who find that they are looking for a new relationship and a different sort of relationship than they've been looking for in the past. Either they're divorced or they've always been single or they're widowed. And although Polly in this book is not actually looking for another relationship, or perhaps she is but doesn't know it, it does seem to reflect people's experience. It doesn't mean, I mean, getting old doesn't mean you can't fall in love. I've certainly done it in later life a couple of times and made a mess of it. But you know, often those sorts of situations are only thought to be relevant to younger women and men. But while a lot of women, I think, are very happy to be single in later life, there's also the feeling that it might be nice to have someone around, even if you didn't live with them, if you had just a gentle, sort of supportive relationship, a loving relationship.
One thing that really struck me when I was reading this book was I really didn't like Helen as a person. I wouldn't want to be friends with a Helen, but at the same time I had a great deal of sympathy for the situation she found herself in. What steps do you think an author needs to take in order to make a character that is not necessarily a likeable one, sympathetic in the eyes of their readers?
That's what I was trying to find out when I wrote Helen, that I wanted her to be quite difficult to like and a bit abrasive. And I started off with her being like that. Within the first chapter, you meet Helen, and she is abrasive. She's quick to an argument, and she's not very forgiving. So I found it quite difficult to channel her journey and to also make her interesting so that people hopefully wanted to know why she was like she was, and why she seemed difficult or abrasive or uncooperative or selfish or whatever people saw in her. Because I also wanted to show that she was worth the effort for her friends, because I guess a lot of us have a friend like that in our lives that we go out for coffee with and think, oh dear, she's hard work, but I do love her. So that's what I was trying to do, really.
So she's not based on any one particular of your friends?
No, absolutely not, no. Several, actually. No, I'm only kidding.
I actually wondered when I was reading about Polly's work as well. Polly writes histories and biographies of these obscure women's groups throughout history, and I saw a parallel between that and your previous novel about the Scrimstead Hospital and the nurses working there. Was any of Polly or any of the other characters drawn from you?
I suppose there are elements of me in Polly, that desire to work alone and have her own space and feel quite happy with that. Yes, I'm always interested in writing about women, and In Love and War, which came out last year, was a non-fiction book which looked at nurses who were nursing severely badly burned airmen in World War II in a particular hospital in England. And I suppose that in itself reflected my interest in those sorts of things. The sorts of things that interest Polly interest me. But I think, yeah, there is some of me in Polly, yes.
And any of the other characters?
Well, you know, no character is me and no character is anyone else, but I'm in all of them, I suppose. Yeah. I think, you know, what was it Flaubert said about Madame Bovary, c'est moi. So the author is always present to some extent, I think, in the characters. Little bits of you creep in.
My favourite character, and I'm sure you've had other people say this to you, is Stella. She's larger than life. She's eccentric, flamboyant actress, star of stage and screen, now getting into the later part of her life. And I'm going to try not to give away any spoilers here, but Stella's dealing with her memory not being like it used to be. Did that take a lot of research to get that portrayal right?
Well, again, the whole issue of dealing with dementia, or the onset of dementia, is drawn from life. Both my parents had Alzheimer's, and I was the only member of the family in the country at the time dealing with it. So it's something that's always interested me and disturbed me, especially when I think of how badly I managed it and how I wish I'd done it better. I think that with Stella doesn't have living relatives, so Polly is her closest friend, and they're a bit like mother and daughter. And so the sort of things that Polly goes through are things that I've been through, and some of the incidents with Stella's memory and moving to dementia are based on things that happened with my parents, one or other of my parents.
Okay. Was that difficult to write about?
No. I mean, I'm thinking back to the late 90s when I went through this with my parents, and I think I've processed it a lot. And I also wrote about it in a very personal way in my little ebook, which is also in print now, Getting On. And I think that writing about it in that was difficult, because I had to admit to myself that I'd managed it really badly, although with the best intentions.
So when you start writing a new novel, do you plan them out, or do you discover where you're going as you write?
I discover where I'm going as I write. I have an idea, like I said at the beginning, that the idea of neighbours and friends and family getting older, but I can't start until I get one character, and the one I got this time was Stella. And once I've got that character, and once I've found a name for her, I can't ever start a character until I've got the right name. And I don't know what that is. I just write a sentence with the character in it with a particular name, and it doesn't work, so I keep on trying with other names until it does. I don't know what that's about, I really don't. But unless I've got the name, I can't build the character. When I've got one character and I know what's going to happen to her, then it's as though she draws around her people who will make the story move along and will also be interesting in their own right. And well, I think it was Margaret Atwood that said that writing fiction is like driving at night without headlights. And that's just how it feels. Sit down every day and think, what the hell's going to happen today? I haven't got a clue. And you sit there until you start writing, or you try things. I try things and they don't work, so I try something else.
Where do you find the names? Anywhere?
Oh, sometimes I walk up and down in front of my bookcase trying to look at writers' names, or what names are on the covers of the books as being the subject of the story. Or I sometimes just write a list. Or I'll be watching television and some character will have a name, I think that's it.
They never change names halfway through the project?
No, never, no.
What does a perfect writing day look like for you?
Oh, well, a perfect writing day would be getting up and taking the dog for a walk, and possibly tidying the house, but not much, and then just sitting at the computer and staying there, possibly until early afternoon, and then perhaps having a break and another walk, and then going back to it and working through till about 8 at night, and then sitting with a sandwich watching something distracting on television.
How many words do you think you get done on a perfect day?
Well, on a perfect day, maybe 2,000 or 3,000. On most days, 1,000 if I'm lucky.
That's still really good. I think Elizabeth Gilbert, in her book Big Magic, she said you only have to do half an hour a day, but you can write a whole book in half-hour increments.
Oh, I don't think I could. I'm not very good at working in fractured time. It takes me time to go back into it, and that's you know, it was more difficult because I have quite a demanding job at the university. So although I can do a lot of that work from home, I'm much better with the whole afternoon than half an hour. Half an hour I'm more likely to make a cup of tea. And sit and drink it and pretend I'm thinking.
And spend lots of time reading?
Yes, not as much as I like, of the things that I like, but I think I'll need to retire before I get there.
So let's look now at your setting. In The Woman Next Door, you placed Emerald Street in Fremantle, and I think in East Fremantle?
South Fremantle.
Mm. Did you go on long walks for research, or was it all from memory?
Well, I used to live in South Fremantle, and when I was first thinking about this book, I went to dinner with friends there who have a lovely old house, which is like Joyce and Mac's house in the book. And I thought, it was summer, and you know, we were sitting out on the veranda at the front, and there were people going by and talking and laughing, and we were sitting there having a glass of wine, and I thought, this is just the right sort of setting for a book about how neighbourhoods work and how neighbours work to support each other, and quite a lot of the people were older people. So it was quiet, you know, they weren't teenagers or noisy crowds returning from the pub or anything like that. So that's what I was trying to create.
So of all the novels that you've published, what was the most fun one for you to write?
Oh gosh, I had a lot of fun with Last Chance Cafe and Bad Behaviour. I suppose the characters in Last Chance Cafe, which I particularly liked, mainly Dot, who is the sort of Stella of that group, and Bad Behaviour because a lot of it is set in the 60s and relates to what happened in the 60s and political events in the 60s and so on. So that was, in terms of fun, that was great fun to write.
What was it like getting published in the first place? What was your journey like to your first publication?
Well, being published, it was a sort of incremental process for me because I started as a journalist. So the first story I got published as a journalist was incredibly exciting. In fact, the first article that I ever wrote was published when I was about 21 and I just got married. And it was in England, and they were launching a new magazine called She and asking for new writers to submit something. So I submitted a story, a humour piece really, and about my new husband. And that was thrilling. I got paid 2 guineas for it, and it seemed an enormous amount of money for something that hadn't taken me very long. And that was when I was, you know, prompted to go into journalism. So I got used to being published, and I really thought there was something wrong with me if I wasn't getting published. And then I came to Australia, and just through a long, involved process, I decided to write a book about alcoholism in families. And that was pretty exciting, except that it was the longest piece of writing that I'd ever done. And when my copies of the book arrived from the publisher, it was so small and thin. I couldn't believe I'd done all that work for such a little book. But I just went on then writing non-fiction, and I didn't even try to write a novel until I was in my late 50s. And so getting my first novel published, because fiction was what I'd always wanted to write, that was a thrill. That was a huge thrill. It was like the 2 guineas and the publication of that short piece in She, because it was the start of something really, really new. I couldn't believe it when my box of books turned up and they looked so gorgeous. That was Game of 4.
Did you send the manuscript off to lots of publishers before you found Pan Macmillan?
Yes, I sent it to probably 6 other publishers, and they all turned it down. And of course, one of the problems with sending something to a publisher is that they just tell you, yes, we like it, or no, with no thanks. They don't tell you what's wrong with it. But eventually one publisher sent it back and said, this is an interesting book and it's well written, but is it supposed to be polemic or is it fiction? And you know, that one, and she said, at the moment it's neither. You have to decide what it's going to be. And that sentence is what made it work for me, because I saw exactly what she meant. I saw that I had put myself in as a character with all my feminist politics spouting out of this character's mouth, and it wasn't good. So I had to go back to the drawing board. I had to take that character out completely and introduce another one, and that fixed it. And the next publisher I sent it to loved it and offered me a contract for that and the next one. So yeah, it was just a bit of a struggle at first. I think the difference between writing journalism and writing a novel is quite profound, and it does take time to get used to it. And my publisher still says to me, every book, you know, there's bits in there of you lecturing people on your politics. Take it out. And she's right. As soon as she tells me.
So you always listen? You always take it out?
I always take it out because it might be in there, but it will be sounding very different.
A bit more subtle.
Yeah.
Do you think the publishing industry has changed a lot since then, or is it still largely the same?
I think it has changed. I think it's got very difficult for new and emerging writers to get published, very difficult. But on the other hand, there is a much greater potential for them to publish online these days and then move to print, so that's good. Very hard for new writers to get published in print, in hardback or softboard paperback the first time. And of course, most writers do want print publication. They want secondary publication as ebooks. But that's changing, and people need to, I think now, settle for ebooks as a way of getting eventually published in print. I think it's very difficult for people to accept. Global financial crisis really hit publishing here in Australia sort of after the crisis itself. There were a couple of years there that were very, very difficult and very dodgy for publishers and writers. It's definitely improving now. And although, you know, we're all worried about what the incoming government the present government will do to authors' copyright and with parallel importation of books, which will hit a lot of people very hard, and especially it will hit new and young writers.
You know, in your earlier days, did you actually put pen to paper, or did you use a typewriter? And is your output much greater as a result of the computer?
Greater, yes, absolutely, absolutely. But I've always written on a keyboard. If I'm not sitting at the keyboard, I don't make notes or anything. I mean, I might make a note, look up, you know, if I'm having a coffee and I think, oh, I must look up something, I'll make a note like that. But I can't do it without a keyboard,